I am very pleased to introduce the first of this afternoon's speakers, Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Ms. Janet Napolitano. Ms. Napolitano was midway through her second term as governor of Arizona when she was called upon to serve as the third Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Prior to joining the Obama administration, she was the first woman to chair the National Governors Association, where she was instrumental in creating the Public Safety Task Force and the Homeland Security Advisors Council. She helped lead the domestic terrorism investigation into the Oklahoma City bombing. As Arizona Attorney General, she helped write the law to break up human smuggling rings, and as governor, she implemented one of the first state Homeland Security strategies in the nation, opened the first state counterterrorism center, and spearheaded efforts to transform immigration enforcement. She's also been a leader in coordinating federal, state, local, and binational Homeland Security efforts and readiness exercises to ensure well-crafted and functional emergency plans. Ms. Napolitano received her Juris Doctorate in 1983 from the University of Virginia School of Law, and thereafter served as a law clerk on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit before entering private practice. And from a personal point of privilege, let me say to you this afternoon that Secretary Napolitano, over the last 4 years, has led our nation's responses to several natural disasters. She has been involved in making sure for the last 4 years that we were ready for any terrorist attack that might take place on our nation and around the world. And equally important, she has partnered with the IACP on our counterterrorism activities. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my particular pleasure to introduce the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, the Honorable Janet Napolitano.
Well, thank you and good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's San Diego. How can it be bad? It's a lovely place. It's great to be back with the IACP. This is my fourth time addressing you as the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. And it's always an honor for me to be with you, the men and women who keep our communities, both here and abroad, safe and secure every day. When I spoke in Orlando 2 years ago, I made note of how we were at a crossroads in our approach to our nation's security, facing increasingly new and complex and evolving threats. These threats put you on the front lines of our counterterrorism efforts in a way that's unprecedented in our nation's history. These threats also require us to fundamentally recast how the federal government works with our state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement partners. In the last 4 years, working together, we have transformed these crucial relationships, helping, I think, make our country more secure and resilient. Now, to achieve this progress, we have worked through problems and broken through some old divides in pursuit of the goal that every law enforcement professional in the country should have the best information, analysis, and training available. And at every step, the IACP and our many colleagues in law enforcement have informed and strengthened the programs and initiatives put in place since the terrorist attacks of 9/11 to keep our country safe. from our efforts to improve information sharing, to making our grant programs more focused on prevention, to developing better training and technology for police and for first responders. For example, the IACP was instrumental in helping federal authorities unify our approach to suspicious activity reports, SARS, ensuring that once documented, they are quickly shared with the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Forces, as well as with the fusion centers for analysis. This unified message effort led you not only to encourage law enforcement to get trained, it also recommended that communities adopt public awareness campaigns to encourage the public to keep an eye out for suspicious behavior and activity. So this effort is now working. The two things together, SARS plus keeping the public informed. To date, almost 250,000 law enforcement officers have been trained through the SARS initiative, and more are getting trained every week. And we have seen how this is working in practice, where actions have helped foil potential plots because suspicious activity was reported. Last year, an employee of a chemical supplier in North Carolina tipped off local police and the FBI to a suspicious attempted purchase of chemicals that could be used to make an explosive device. When the individual, Khalid Adawasari, attempted to have those chemicals shipped to a Frank company in Texas so he could pick them up, an employee there also became suspicious and called the police. 2 employees, 2 states reported suspicious activity. The information was analyzed and connected by law enforcement agencies trained in SARS and contributed to the arrest of the individual. He was convicted in June of attempted use of a weapon of mass destruction. I also want to note that last year, the IACP passed a resolution supporting the If You See Something, Say Something public awareness campaign. This is the campaign where we really focus on our individual citizens and the shared responsibility of everyone to maintain situational awareness and to make sure that if something is going awry, that it is reported promptly to law enforcement authorities. Everyone can remember See Something, Say Something, and we've now expanded the campaign to cities and states, to private sector partners in the hospitality, tourism, retail, sports, and entertainment industries, and we have also seen great examples of how it works in practice. Last month, for example, an alert construction worker helped to prevent the shooting or more shooting in front of the Empire State Building and preventing it from becoming an even worse tragedy than it already was by quickly finding police officers who then acted to take down the shooter. I'd like to move on, however, to address some issues of concern to all of us. And the first is what and how we deal with the active shooter. In the past months and years, we have seen a series of international and domestic violent extremist incidents involving the so-called active shooter. This includes incidents here at home, in cities and small towns and suburbs, including the recent shootings in Aurora, Colorado, in New York City, and at the Sikh Temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. It also includes the sophisticated multiple shooter 2008 Mumbai attack and the 2011 Norway attack conducted by Anders Breivik. It is often difficult to prevent, to mitigate, or to lessen the harm of such attacks. Yet after-the-fact analysis often reveals some early clues as to a person's intent, as demonstrated by the Independent Commission report on last year's Norway attack. Preventing and responding to active shooter threats must be a priority for all of us: federal agencies, state and local law enforcement, the private sector. DHS is increasingly involved in this area, working closely with the FBI. Our efforts largely fall into 3 categories, all designed to empower our state and local partners and the communities that you serve. First and foremost, we are working to better understand the behaviors and indicators that lead to these acts of violence, the tactics used, and the actions we can take to help prevent them in the future. We've worked with the FBI and our international partners to produce classified and unclassified case studies about past active shooter events, including the Norway attack, and have made them available to state and local law enforcement. These case studies focus on behaviors and indicators so that frontline personnel will be better able to recognize pre-incident indicators of an emerging active shooter threat based on lessons learned from analyses of past attacks. We now know, for example, that our immediate response to an active shooter situation must assume it could be part of a larger attack and not only a self-contained event. So our planning in advance must take that kind of operation into account. The second thing we are doing with respect to active shooters is making sure that our frontline personnel know what to do through an extensive program of training for state and local law enforcement, as well as for the private sector. These include the DHS Office of Infrastructure Protection's Active Shooter Awareness Program, the FLETC training for U.S. law enforcement officers, and the Joint Terrorism Awareness Workshop put on by DHS through FEMA, the FBI, and the National Counterterrorism Center. This last, also known as JACTAWS, is designed to prepare frontline officers to protect against and respond to coordinated terrorist attacks against multiple targets at the same time. The JACTAWS program will be the subject of a later presentation at this conference, and I think you'll find it well worth attending. The third thing we have done with respect to the active shooter is incorporated the active shooter situation into our training materials for countering violent extremism, another key area where we have made significant progress through our work together. This partnership is critical because, as you know, local authorities and community members are often best able to identify warning signs and to intervene before an act of violence occurs. So let me turn, if I might, to countering violent extremism, or CVE. Countering violent extremism is a responsibility we all share. And DHS continues to work with many of you to gain a better understanding of the behaviors, the tactics, the other indicators of possible terrorist activity, and the best ways to mitigate or prevent that activity. We're doing this as well in three main ways. We're engaging in extensive analysis and research on the behaviors and indicators of violent extremism and sharing what we learn with frontline law enforcement and community partners. We're addressing the dynamics of violent extremism by strengthening partnerships at the state, local, and international levels. And we are expanding support for information-driven, community-oriented policing efforts through training and grants. For example, our 2012 grant guidance prioritizes CVE and allows funds to be used in support of state and local CVE efforts. And today I'm announcing another critical milestone with the launch of our new CVE Training Resource Web Portal. This CVE training portal, which we are co-hosting with the FBI, and which was developed in close partnership with the IACP and other law enforcement associations, is now available to federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial, as well as correctional law enforcement training practitioners. And it's available through the Homeland Security Information Network, HISN. It provides access to hundreds of the most current CVE training materials, case studies, analytic products, and other resources. Also, it provides a platform for communication and information sharing about CVE, allowing you and your officers to get answers to questions from reputable experts, to share what you're seeing in your communities with DHS and other law enforcement agencies around the country. To accelerate use of this new portal, we just held a 2-day Train the Trainer session. So as I stand before you today, more than 100 training practitioners have access to this new portal, with more to be added in the coming days. IACP has been involved in these efforts from the beginning, and I want to specifically thank LAPD Deputy Chief Michael Downing, the major city chiefs and the National Consortium for Advanced Policing, Arkansas State Police Program Director Jamie Cook, members of IACP's state and provincial academy directors and its chair, Bill Stevens, and finally the IACP CVE Advisory Group for their support and leadership in this effort. Our work together on countering violent extremism is another example of how DHS has sought your input and advice, and then work hard to make our products and support as timely and relevant and actionable as we can. There are other examples as well. Last year, you told us how lean budgets were impacting training for police departments nationwide. So our Office of State and Local Law Enforcement brought IACP and other law enforcement representatives to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center and to the Secret Service's National Cyber Forensics Training Center to better leverage our training resources at the local level. You told us you wanted more information on federal initiatives such as the DHS Blue Campaign against human trafficking. We've worked hard to get you that information and also made sure we receive your feedback so that we can constantly improve our operations. And you told us about the importance of law enforcement executives being directly involved in designing FirstNet, the new nationwide public safety broadband network. So we worked with Acting Secretary of Commerce Rebecca Blank to add 2 leaders from local law enforcement to the FirstNet Board of Directors, as well as a number to the advisory committees to the board. And let me just pause here a moment to say that I sit on that board as the secretary. We had our first full meeting last week, and as someone who has dealt with interoperability and all the issues and costs associated with that over the past years, I actually came away from that meeting more excited and convinced that we are going to solve this problem as a nation and have interoperability available across every square mile of this country, and it's going to be sooner rather than later. So that broadband network and your work and your advocacy on behalf of that is going to have a real impact on the safety of our first responders, of our frontline personnel, of the officers that you lead. I think that we've made significant progress in improving how we work together, how we share information, how we train together and build new capabilities, how we identify and address threats, and how we enhance public safety. And I think the country is safer as a result. We're proud of this work, and we're grateful for the partnership in these efforts. But as I said earlier, our work is not done. In fact, our work is never done. We look forward to partnering on the important initiatives IACP is leading, including on officer safety and suicide prevention for officers. And we continue to work in one of the most challenging budgetary environments in modern history. And indeed, we know that many police departments and first responders across the country are facing tough economic challenges. Many of you have had to let go of officers or had difficulty hiring or retaining personnel. The tough choices we're all facing should not come at the expense of public safety or national security. The Department of Homeland Security and this administration are strongly committed to continuing to support law enforcement and first responders to protect those who protect us, and to recognize that Homeland Security begins with hometown security, that you are the front lines that need to have the resources, the training, the supervision, the equipment necessary to deal with today's